Hello, and welcome to a PTC hosted webcast, Seagate's story of productivity, quality, and scale, establishing an enterprise digital thread with a PLM foundation. My name is Yas Patin, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. During this webcast, you will hear from Amir Mazucci, a technologist at Seagate, and Dale Westhoff, a technical sales fellow at PTC. Amir and Dave will discuss how Seagate is driving high volume complex manufacturing to the next level, leveraging Windchill PLM. And with that, I will hand it over to Amir to get us started.
Thank you. Glad to be here and glad to participate and share our digital PLM transformation journey with you all. It's been a very challenging and rewarding project. A little bit about Seagate. We have been in business for 40 years plus. We design and manufacture a variety of the storage devices for several markets and applications. The traditional hard drive, also known as HDD, SSD, consumer, electronic products, system for edge, cloud, and enterprise solutions. We are a vertical integrated company. That's one of the key contributors to our success. We make majority of our key components, the ASICs, the heads, media, subassembly boards, a lot of mechanical parts, as well as our manufacturing, build, and test equipment. We have about 5 design centers across the US, Asia, and Europe, and we have several manufacturing facilities in Asia, as well as Europe, and numerous number of contract manufacturers and suppliers. For 40 years plus, we have been focused on solving the constraints of enabling the efficient storage of mass capacity data across 2 primary device level vectors, hard drive capacities and performance. We are announcing the 18 terabyte drive, and by 2025, we could get to 30 terabyte in a single HDD unit. In the last 5-6 years, Seagate did number of M&As, LSI, SSD division, LaCie, Xyratech, Dot Hills. The demand for storage is increasing. Data creation is at all-time high. And our core HDD business is not really going away. And SSD addition is a key component and complement to our core competency. We are evolving and making several new growth investment in software, storage, objects, and services. These enabling transformation in data spheres is aimed to solve the rapid mass storage demand. That's just a little bit about Seagate. As far as the project, sharing a scope and a strategy with you, the first thing about our scope was really to transform our business processes. Our approach was first to focus on the streaming the business processes and then the tool to follow. As mentioned, we are evolving, so processes, the right processes and business model had to be in place before we brought the tool on board. And we'll show some of these processes later in the presentation. The second thing was really replacing several legacy aging systems that we acquired during these M&As that I mentioned. Some of them were heavily mass customized for certain use cases. They didn't really interface and talk with each other. There were poor data flow, and obviously costly to upgrade, maintain, and there were some also security features. Our first takeaway, I always use that, was we shall begin with end in mind. So we knew we're not going to do this in the first round, so we have left phases, but we always start thinking about how we want the end to look like. As you see on the diagram on the right, we started with following the life cycle. So starting with very single component level, and then built that into sub-assemblies. And then there were a number of quality procedures. There was interfaces to ERP and CAS and MES. there were test processes, there were manufacturing, and then obviously final products in variety of configurations. One of the most paid attention areas of this scope was bill of material. There were creators, there were authors, there were approvers, there were viewers, the consumers. So there were not one single users that we had to deal with. And these BOMs, bill of materials, as went down the downstream, it had to be used in a different, and I also call it permutation of the BOM. It had to be converted into planning BOM, to manufacturing BOM, cost BOM, compliance BOM. So we really kind of stepped back and making sure we could address the life cycle, we could address component, subcomponent, product, and all the related manufacturing procedures that completely turned into what we wanted to be a digital thread. So that was really our scope and the strategy as far as the processes, replacing the tools, the interfaces, the data, to really build the foundation for digital thread. The strategy, the scope, we really wanted to make sure the investment plan and the architect is really set for the next 10 years and beyond what we know as hard drive, SSD, and components. From the get-go, we wanted to emphasize out-of-the-box functionality, and that was a key kind of a decision maker in terms of the tool selection and with minimum customization. The third item was building a strong foundation for future growth and expansion. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit later, how we bring other elements of digital thread into this equation. The fourth item, which was very, very close to, I guess, my attention, is be able to get early engagement and active participation from all stakeholders to minimize future adoption and change management issues. And lastly, leverage agile methodology and implementation. So this was really the mission of this transformation project that was built around maximizing productivity, really meaning less and reduction in errors and streamlining processes for speed, efficiency, improved quality and data integrity, and really less reliance on human interaction and decision. So in a nutshell, was our mission, scope, and a strategy. Some of the project challenges. This was over at the time we embarked on this project. There were, and still are, 7,000 active users across all the sites I mentioned. Over 30 plus million records that we had to migrate between all the other tools, from the parts on BOMs and ECs and docs. 35 plus upstream and downstream interfaces, multiple business units and functional groups, several design centers, product lines, and factory operation, internal and external suppliers, contract manufacturer, and ODMs. What was in the scope, without saying all of it on the screen, it was everybody. We really didn't leave any groups out. They were all in the scope, all the business units and functional. So in order to achieve that, as you see on the diagram, we had to really build a strong, active, cross-functional team with all of our users from all the disciplines. We had to keep them involved during this long journey and engage them along the way. As I mentioned, begin with end in mind, the project was extremely user-centric from the get-go. And our strategy was really making sure that all the sites and all the different users, as I mentioned, the people who create it, the people who administrate it, and the people who consumes it, all kind of connected and all on the same page as far as the tool goes. And then again, the other readiness check was not around just the tool and the technology. I've read at once that 70% of all digital transformation project fails because it focuses only on technology and not people. So lack of adaptation of business model and processes and no efficient change management strategy that leads to that 70%. So we wanted our checklist to be around the technology, around the tool, around the processes, as well as the people. That's really what that digital thread and connectivity was all about. In terms of our ecosystem, as we discussed the digital thread a little bit later, in the middle of the page, you see the PTC windshield. On the right side, it's really what I call all the upstream, all the requirements that came in from the customers or internal business unit, all the interaction between electronic, mechanical, firmware, software, and test. And these have to be well integrated from an upstream into this, what I call PTC windshield box, right? On the right, really the partners, all the compliance and all the suppliers who would use that information. All the boxes below are all the downstream systems, the ERP, the data warehouse, a lot of the quality modules that we have to send data to, and obviously MES, big portion of this, not just the drive, but also our component, head, media, PCBAs. And even we had some interfaces with our HR. And then very top there, the reports and all the analytics and all the metrics we use every day. So this architect had to be in place for really building that digital thread foundation, which is really all about connectivity and seamless data flow across the enterprise. So as far as the business value prop, for a while I really struggled with how we really show the value. Even though it was like a Nike project, we just did it, but I really wanted some metrics and some matter in terms of the business value to be measured, and so we can recognize the investment. So working with all the users I mentioned, we built sort of 3 pillars, as you see on the bottom there. Things around interfaces, things around automation, things around the models, as it relates to the CAD integration, as it relates to all the upstream and all the where used and all the deviation. The middle one is around the simplification and reduction of complexity around design processes, around change processes, doc management, and all the parts and bill of materials. Really try to get efficiency there. And then on the common and the standards, again, across so many different business units and factories. The 4 boxes you see there is really where the foundation of start measuring and monitoring. Things around cycle time, how long it takes a task to complete, how much errors and rework would reduce, what it takes to time to find information and be able to make decision. And across the organization layer, how would that feed into a better product, a better performance, design efficiency, and some of the features. And then obviously that will lead to overall productivity and the scalability, which really back again to our top goal, time to market, customer sat, and lower costs. So that's how I was able to divide it out in layers from the very day-to-day people back to the organization, back to the groups, back to product lines, back to some overall corporate metrics that we can measure to become agile and nimble and be able to do more with less as we constantly evolve and grow, and be able to get things done faster and be able to work collaboratively and be able to make decisions faster and reduce errors. But still, I didn't give up on the ROI model. So what I did, this is the hypothetical model. In our previous tool, I was able to go log and capture the hours all users were logged into the tool. I give you a very close model, about 2 million hours in 1 year. Well, we'll have about 7,000 users, right? So that gives us average 285 hours per user per year. Then not all users are the same, as we mentioned. Then I broke them into 4 to 5 different categories. There are users that are inside the tool 30 hours a week. That's about 5% of our users, a lot of the authors. Then there are users that are in the tools for 20 hours a week. That's about 10% of our user community. And you see 10 hours, 5 hours. But surprisingly, you see number 4, that 60% of users were inside the tool 4 hours a month. And these are people who come and approve things. And again, some of the managers. And surprisingly, C and D were the highest cost users. Again, some of the authors, some of the creators. So I was able to get that model by the hours, by the percentage. Then I went to finance, and that was the tough job. Try to get the weighted average user cost. And to be honest with you, it's a really low ball part because again, there's a mix in US, in Europe, and Asia across the 7,000 users. So with help of finance, I was able to get somewhere between 35 to 45. These are the weighted average across that percentage I showed you. So I use 40 hours per hour. So based on all the previous items I shared with you on the previous page, so looking at, again, time to find information, reducing errors, reducing rework, be able to get things done faster. All of that, I said, what if we save 10% in 1 year across that user community, which is 200K at $40, that's $8 million. And many other companies I talked to, they said, look for somewhere between 15 to 25. I use 10% saving, and we're still looking at it. So that's a ROI model you could consider using if you're able to get your user logging and user portfolio, user average usage, and then the weighted average. This would be a good hourly saving model you could use. Implementation. Little bit about implementation. So initially, I collected 200 plus voice of customer, really learning about all the key gaps and pain points. Even though I knew majority of them, I didn't want to make any assumptions. Then we created a very comprehensive requirement document, 850 line items, and it was over 22 pages. Then I built an internal business case and got 3 executive sponsors. We sent out the BRD, the business requirement document, to 7 solution providers. 3 came back within a month and showed interest doing the project with us. And we did a week-long POC, workshop demo, with the top 2, really focusing on the key features and functionality. And we had about 50 users from that team I shared with you attending the workshop. Then the tough decision was doing a side-by-side among the top 2 for all the pros and cons, the technology, the features, alignment with our business model, be able to look at the portfolio, the risk and quality, the readiness, the timeline, cloud versus on-premise, and obviously including cost and the license model. When we did that, PTC was the clear winner and the choice among our decision-making process. Then obviously with a project this size, we had to get a system integrator. Then we interviewed 7 system integrators and chose the top one based on really experience with Seagate and PTC technology. So we had the requirement, we had the PTC Windshield solution, and then we had our system integrator, then we kicked off the project. Then the project-wise, as you see, that helped, all of the groundwork helped us to let the system integrator and our internal IT to go work on the blueprint. When we had something ready, as I mentioned about the agile methodology, then we built the build and test. We actually laid out 3 to 4 sprints and regression, and start showing different aspects of the tool. Started with a small team and grow the team and grow the team So we had early feedback, and that was part of our strategy. How do we get the users involved early and be able to test? We really didn't have a dedicated test team. So between IT and between system integrator and the user community, this was our game plan into this sprint model, be able to return defects back to IT really quickly and get them solved and go to the next sprint. Then we did a pilot. We had a huge task of training, and right in the middle of that, we were hit with the pandemic. All of our travel plan was kind of out the door. We had to go plan B with the training, and we actually embarked on a virtual tool, which is really a layer that sits on top of the windshield called WalkMe, and we brought that in to assist with kind of an online or tutor and built a lot of kind of a online help with that. User training was critical to get everybody, because the number one thing we had to make sure that people were ready on day one, not just the tool, not just the data, not just the interface. Everything had to be ready. And this project was a big bang. We had less than 3 days to pause all the other tools over a long weekend and switch over and not disrupt the factory, not disrupt production line, not disrupt customers. So we rolled it out after the pilot test, and we are in actual production for 6-7 months now. With our first release, there are 2 more releases to come. The first release really covered all the majority of the business units we talked about, all the functional unit. A lot of what we called good to have are kind of yet to come, and there's another business unit that's integrating later on. So this has been our implementation methodology. Took a little over 2 years, but there was a lot of groundwork. And at one time meaning months, we had over 100 people between the user, system integrator, and IT involved and engaged. It was a huge project. Some of the process improvement, I'm not going to go through all that, but I just provided the samples. These items you see there, as far as the processes in terms of the areas, whether they were interface, whether they were data model or automation or content, these are some of the areas that led to that ROI model and business value that I mentioned earlier. And I had built some metrics around that. So how do we have data flow from the CAD to the PLM? So there are ways to look at that, improved it, and looking at this measurement. Another big part is single part catalog. We have a lot of business unit, making sure there's one unified single part catalog that helps Seagate, that helps our supplier. It gives us, better pricing when you have everything. We don't have 7 different part number for the same capacitor. So advantages there. BOM standardization was massive work, and streamlining those between design centers, extremely helpful. Also EC, we make changes every day till the last day of end of life. So those optimization will benefit significantly. Those are the other process areas that we talked about. Where used report, almost everyone downstream consumer of the data somehow uses the where used report, a quick report, fast report, good report, they can make decision. So these are some of the examples we used as far as the process improvement, really independent from the tool, and the tool really enabled them in terms of gaining those efficiency we were looking at. Again, data models, connectivity, interfaces, simplification, standardization, tracking, reporting, automation, and centralizing is what we were after around these process improvements. So with that, I give you a recap of, share with you the Windchill transformational elements that we looked at. It was really, again, as I mentioned a number of times, it was really about connecting people and processes across functional units with a digital thread for innovation. it's really all about using technology to change how people work and maximizing the use of data in business decision and enabling greater efficiency and collaboration in the entire value chain. Some of those, as I mentioned, consolidation of number of tools and security, data integrity and integration, single source of the truth, really the foundation for digital thread, the standardization, simplification across all the sites, all the factories, all the suppliers, really going after some very hard, measurable productivity, efficiency, like I mentioned, cycle times, errors, consistency, and collaboration, and more automation. User experience. This was huge about the data adoption, about the tool adoption. So the tool provides a modern UI, easy to navigate, and it helps users to really, with a simple training, be able to get familiar with the new tool. And obviously the foundation. We are not done. We're not done. We're looking at other areas to expand, more CAD automation, augmented reality, supplier collaboration, quality modules, requirement modules, and just we're not stopping. One time I interviewed someone, they said the maximum ROI you will get out of the PLM solution is you have the entire end-to-end, not just a piece of it for part and BOM. So we're definitely looking at the additional expansion beyond the first release and the initial implementation. And obviously, cost effective, better technology, total gaining better on the total cost of ownership, maintenance, and security. With that, I'll hand it to Dale. And thank you very much for the opportunity to share with you the journey.
Well, thanks, Amir. So I would like to take a couple minutes to talk about what Seagate sees as some of the next possible steps in PLM. You've heard Amir talk already a little bit about the digital thread. So I'd like to start by making sure everyone understands what we see as the digital thread. A digital thread is the ability to connect all the content that defines your product in a way that allows you to reuse that information upstream and downstream without reauthoring it or copying it from system to system to system. So let's take a quick look at what that might look like in terms of a PLM digital thread. Many products often start with a set of requirements. And of course, within PLM, we have the capability in Windchill to author those requirements. Once we have them authored, we'd like to be able to leverage them downstream. One of the places we'd like to start leveraging those requirements is within the design process. So as we design our product, we're able to go back and look at the requirements that we had for the product, and we're going to be able to directly tie those requirements to the design objects so that we know when a specific requirement has been satisfied and which components or assemblies actually meet those requirements. Now, in the same way, we want to be able to leverage the design data to automate the generation of an engineering bill of material. So we want to leverage that structure that's created in CAD, as well as other documents that we create within the design process to be able to build out that product structure and build out that bill of material and do it while maintaining those relationships. Now, once we have an engineering bill of material, it's very common that we may need to embellish that bill of material to show specific information that may be about one plant versus another plant. So we may have manufacturing views of our bill of material that are plant specific. Again, within the digital thread, we want to be able to leverage the information that was already done in engineering and just augment it with the information that is necessary to make it plant specific. Now, once we have all of that great, rich design information within the system, we want to be able to leverage it downstream in a variety of different ways. So we want to be able to build out, training experiences. We want to be able to leverage the design information to build automated work instructions that may include augmented reality experiences. We want to be able to deliver assembly instructions directly to the line. And we may want to be able to catalog and manage things like tooling and fixturing that's related to the specific designs that we've built within the PLM environment. Together, all of this makes up that digital thread where everything from requirements through design, through bill of material management is able to be tied together and then leveraged downstream without having to recreate it. Now, of course, even in the best companies, things change. So one of the key capabilities of any digital thread is that we have to be able to wrap that digital thread around a change process so that as things like our requirements change, that can be reflected into our design processes and our design itself. Those design changes can be reflected into our manufacturing bill of material, which can in turn be reflected down into the various downstream systems where we need to leverage that. So part of the digital thread that is very critical is to have a single design process that encompasses all of that different aspects of the thread. And then lastly, an aspect of quality or an aspect of change is the ability to also tie in quality. So the Windchill QMS module allows us to have items like corrective action, preventative actions, non-conformance, customer experiences, all wrapped into an 8D problem-solving approach so that as that information within our digital thread matures, we're able to directly tie this quality information to it. And by tying it directly to the parts and objects within Windchill, we have a permanent record of how we address the various quality actions that occurred against our design. So that's just a little bit about what we perceive as a digital thread and the value that it brings to a company. Now let's take a look at where Seagate is today, and keeping in mind the idea of the digital thread, where might they go from here? Let's start by maybe looking at some of the information that Amir's already touched on. Seagate performed a very extensive data migration to move information out of other systems, out of legacy systems and into Windchill. And then they were able to develop new and improved business processes around that new migrated data. Some of the business processes that Seagate implemented within phase one include, new part and new product introduction processes. Of course, part and BOM management. You'll notice that they moved over 1 million different part numbers into the Windchill environment as part of that. Included in phase one was supplier and supplier management. So managing approved material lists, approved manufacturer lists is part of phase one. So in addition to those Seagate part numbers that were moved over, they also moved over all of the supplier part numbers as well. And of course, part of phase one is configuration management. So you'll notice down below, I've mentioned that they have over 100,000 customer-specific configurations that they're managing today. And of course, they've automated their change management process within Windchill, and they are pushing a very large number of bills of material every week from Windchill down to their ERP system as well as to other downstream systems. So in terms of looking at where they may be able to leverage this information going forward, the first thing that Seagate has been looking at is the idea of adding idea management to the overall solution. Next. With idea management, they're going to be able to provide an interface that allows anyone in the company to enter new suggestions and new ideas into the system and allow those to mature, potentially ending up resulting in new products or new approaches within their products. Again, they'll be able to directly tie those ideas to the information in Windchill that they created. Additionally, Seagate is looking at being able to better leverage their visual information. So the information coming out of both mechanical and electrical CAD tools will be able to be leveraged into augmented reality experiences. And those augmented reality experiences are going to be able to, in turn, be leveraged into downstream applications such as, tooling configurations for the line, testing statuses, various things like that, where augmented reality is a step above any of the current approaches that they're using with documents or even videos. Another area that Seagate is looking at is to add the ability to start managing requirements. As I mentioned earlier, Seagate currently has over 100,000 customer configurations within the system. Seagate receives customer-specific requirements for almost every disk drive or product that they develop. Those customer requirements have to be tracked and tied to the specific end items that deliver those customer features. Today, they do a lot of that manually outside of PLM. In the future, we want to be able to do that tied into Windchill. When we tie those parts, or those requirements into Windchill, we're going to be able to associate them directly to the products and parts that fulfill the requirements, so that we'll have a permanent record of how a specific customer configuration was built against the customer requirements and how those customer requirements are satisfied. Next, let's talk a little bit about quality management. Today, Seagate manages a lot of the quality events that occur within their company manually or in separate systems. In the future, we want to be able to tie those quality events directly into the products and parts within the PLM environment that are impacted by the quality event that occurred. This is a great example of the digital thread in play, where we've now created that permanent link between the PLM objects, the parts in the bills of material, and the quality events that occurred. Seagate is also looking at their regulatory compliance strategy and how they might be able to better leverage what they've already done within Windchill to improve that approach. PTC supports a integration with a third-party application called Ascent, and Ascent manages a large database of regulatory compliance statuses for commercial off-the-shelf parts, both electrical and mechanical. And Ascent does all of the legwork necessary to determine the regulatory status of the supplier parts, and then can feed that information back to Seagate. So by tying the Seagate parts and the supplier part numbers associated with that within Windchill into the Ascent database, they're able to roll up a regulatory status for any of their products that they have. So there is a current effort underway at Seagate to evaluate the Ascent integration and determine how they can best leverage that. And then lastly, Seagate is also taking a look at the approaches that they use today for manufacturing process planning, or in other words, how do we create work instructions and assembly instructions that are used both in the factory and potentially by third-party partners that are building subassemblies for Seagate. And what they want to be able to do here is determine how can they leverage the bills of material and the information that's already in Windchill to automate that process of generating these process plans. This last one, the manufacturing process planning, is more of a long-term initiative for Seagate, not something that's currently underway like the other initiatives, but something that they have in their longer-term plans. So that gives you an idea of some of the ways that Seagate is leveraging the information that they've already put into Windchill to look at ways of extending that digital thread. And as Amir mentioned, a lot of the high value that you can get from a PLM system really comes when we bring these other areas into the picture. So they've done a great job of laying the foundation. With PLM now up and running, all of these other areas are places where Seagate can potentially see value going forward. So with that, I think we've covered everything that we want to talk about today. So I'll turn it back over to Yaz to wrap up.
So this concludes our webcast for today. Thank you for spending this time with us. Once again, I would like to thank our presenters, Amir and Dale, for participating in today's discussion. And I'd also like to thank our audience for attending this webcast. We hope you found this event valuable and will return for future PTC events. Have a great rest of your day.